Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host, Lucian Valkovic, and before I announce my guest, just a reminder of a disclaimer. This interview and all my interviews are not a recommendation to buy, sell shares, products, or services. Always do your due diligence and consult with your financial advisor. And today we have a brilliant discussion lined up. I'm joined by two sharpest minds in finance, geopolitics, economics forecasting. That is Mr. Martin Armstrong, the economist, creator of the economic confidence model, founder of Armstrong Economics, and Mr. Alex Krainer, hedge fund manager, author of Mastering Uncertainty, and geopolitical analyst. Gents, delighted to have you both here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, you don't get every day Martin Armstrong and Sasha here, so this will be, I believe, one hell of a talk. I believe that we are in for candid, no holds barred discussion on global markets, power structures, and the future of world economy, with the goal to challenge conventional narratives and uncover hard truths about the system shaping our world. I would like to start with the state of the global economy and your views on the current economic landscape. That will be actually my next question, same question for you both. The global economy is grappling with inflation, debt crisis, and supply chain disruptions. What's the one critical factor most analysts are overlooking, and why does it matter more than the headline suggests? Martin, let's start with you.
Well, our computer's been projecting we're in a stagflation period into 28. You do get inflation with increased hostilities, war, etc. But we're not getting the economic growth to go along with it. In addition, I think what everybody's ignoring is that there are two economies in the world that are actually shrinking in size. That is Japan and Germany. I think largely that's, I just had somebody there in meetings at the EU, and they confirmed that Germany is the one that's really pushing very heavily for war. And they need a distraction from their economic decline, the same way as Macron in Canada was running against Trump and ignoring all the domestic issues. So that's what they do. They always pick something, an external force. It's them, it's not me.
Yeah, what about you, Alex? How do you see it?
Well, I have to say I largely agree with everything that Martin said. I've been kind of predicting myself for a couple of years now that the Western world goes into a crisis of stagflation, and that a number of countries, let's say maybe most of them, with the exception of the US, will experience an accelerating period of inflation, which might even rise up to hyperinflationary levels. So I think that we are on our way to that outcome. The problem is, how do you predict it? When does it start? We already had one leg of inflation, 2021, 2022. Inflations go in cycles. It goes up, then it falls off for a few years, then it does another. Usually it's three cycles and spans 10 to 15 years. We've seen one cycle, and I think we go into the next one. It'll be particularly painful for Britain, Japan, and the EU.
Yeah, Martin, your economic confidence model has predicted major turning points with accuracy. What's the next major pivot point you see, and how do you expect governments or central banks to mishandle it?
Well, the big problem with the central banks, and I do talk to a number of them, I mean, it's that they have no tools left. All they had was Keynesian economics. And when you raise interest rates to fight inflation, it made sense in the 1930s when we had a balanced budget federally. All right. So the interest rate hike would affect the people directly. But today, the central banks and all of them, they have no means to control anything. They raise interest rates, and the governments are the biggest borrowers. So the interest expenditures blow out. Um, so this is the real problem. And you know, like Alex was saying, when does it happen? Generally, um, what I saw in the '87 crash was that you had the Plaza Accord, okay, 1985. Then in February '87, you had the Louvre Accord. So all the central banks got together and said, okay, that's enough. The dollar is going down far enough. When the dollar made new lows, the traders went, oh my God, they can't stop it. And that created the crash. All right. Once people lose confidence that nobody's really in control, then holy hell breaks loose. That's the tipping point. So I think it's, maybe, war. Our computer model had projected June 2nd, and it was exactly, I mean, the May 15th target was on the ECM for the war itself. That very day became, the peace talks that failed. Then June 2nd, you have Zelensky at the direction of Europe and most likely MI6 attacking, all the nuclear bombers in Russia. I mean, let's put this in reality. This was not self-defense. Those bombers were not engaged in Ukraine. Taking out the nuclear bombers was for NATO, not for Ukraine. Simple as that. So I think this was Russia's Pearl Harbor. And my sources there, basically, I think Putin's been put into a corner. He either responds aggressively or he's overthrown. Simple as that.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Alex? That he will potentially be overthrown?
I would say I don't see it that way because I think that Vladimir Putin has extremely high approval ratings in Russia. So, and I think that he has generally support from the policymaking circles, from his government, from the military, from the secret services, and the whole range. It's true that there's a lot of pressure for him to respond, but at the same time, I think that they are aware, not just him, but his government, his cabinet. They are aware that expanding the war to a wider conflict between Russia and the West would be the most generous, most beautiful, most magical Christmas gift that he could possibly give to his enemies, who are the globalists in the city of London and on Wall Street. And so I think that he will resist, and he will instead probably try to respond aggressively within Ukraine in some um, asymmetric way to say like, aha, you see, okay, there we showed them. Putin's greatest revenge, his greatest mm, coup in this could be just to simply prevail and to win against the West. Because let's keep in mind, the reason why everybody in the West is panicked is because if they lose in Ukraine, this is the end of Western hegemony in the world. It's the it's a break with the past 500 years of history. It's a complete change in the nature of global order. So everybody knows on those levels what the stakes are. And so he will not make the mistake of giving them the gift that they want.
Okay, Alex, you've written about the fragility of the current financial system. If you had to pinpoint a single biggest vulnerability, whether it's debt, derivatives, or something else, what is it? And how could it unravel, if you can pinpoint one?
Well, I think that the debt overhang is obviously the factor that's going to undo the system. But having said that, that's all these manifestations are all part of one thing, and that one thing is baked into the system from the get-go, from the moment the first debt-based dollar went into circulation. It's a mathematical certainty that the system at some point implodes. As these things tend to happen, um, usually nothing happens until there is some triggering event, which is impossible to predict what it's going to be and when it's going to happen. And the imbalances are there, the pressure on the system is there, but the market is determined by its human participants.
Of course.
It's down to the human psychology, and so long as everybody goes along, assumes that nothing will happen tomorrow because nothing happened yesterday, the markets kind of glide. They melt up or they melt down. They have corrections, normal cycles. But then you have something like, Lehman Brothers moment, and then the dam bursts and everything goes into a mega crisis. So the debt is the problem traditionally. I mean, traditionally, millennia ago, it used to be solved by debt jubilees. So the debt would simply be written off and the system carries on. This is no longer done. So at some point we get a crisis. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that the Western financial systems have been practically um, chronically in crises, economic, financial crises, forever. There's like a bull cycle when, the credit cycle takes off because of this or that reason, and then everybody's prosperous one cycle, and then it goes into a crisis, and then it spends more time in a crisis than not in a crisis.
Right. My next question is for both of you. Central banks are pushing digital currencies and tightening monetary policy. Is this a coordinated effort to consolidate power, or they are just reacting to chaos? What's the end game here? Maybe Sasha, Alex, you can continue, then we will go to Martin.
Well, I don't know. I was always under the impression that they were doing to consolidate our freedoms and democracy. The implication of your question is disturbing. No, but joking aside, yes, it's an attempt to close down the hatches on the digital ghetto. But the only way for them to be successful with digit CBDCs is to unroll the system flawlessly and for the people to accept it. This is very unlikely because, already in Europe, it looks like they're going to go with CBDCs alongside with cash, and then they're going to try to phase out cash gradually, and they're going to be tightening the matrix gradually. Well, people will reject it. When people reject the currency, they go to the black markets. We are already on the verge of civil wars in Europe. So I think that maybe what CBDC is going to do is actually going to catalyze the decline and the crisis and the resulting chaos as it did in Nigeria on their pilot project in 2021. But there's no predicting. We'll have to find out when it happens.
Yeah, of course. Martin, same question. Is this a consolidation of power? They are just reacting to chaos, and what's the end game?
Uh, yes, I mean, look, you just had Spain limit the amount of cash are getting taken out of an account. It's a war on cash. All right. And if you just look at every one of these wars, I mean, World War One, they shut down all the stock markets. All right. So the CBDCs, they are trying to push in Europe, mainly as a capital control. Typically, what you'll see is some sort of event that they may even create to justify, oh, we now have to eliminate the cash for terrorists or this or that, whatever concoction they come up with. But their main objective is when war starts, and look, I think that they will. I agree with Alex that Putin is the smartest man in the room, and I don't see him taking the bait and attacking NATO. What I mean by him getting more aggressive would be against Ukraine. Mm-hmm. What I am concerned about is that there are, neocons behind him as well, and the criticism that they put out behind the curtain is that he should have went into Ukraine like we did into Iraq and would have been all over with in 6 weeks. And that the fact that he only tried to protect the Donbass has allowed this thing to escalate endlessly. My computer's warning about basically November. So, and you had Zelensky try to assassinate him. I can't believe they're that stupid. But they sell it as like, oh, you eliminate Putin, you eliminate the war. No, you eliminate Putin and you're going to get a real war. He's at least he's probably the most intelligent leader on the game board at this stage. But the CBDCs are definitely for capital controls. And we had a lot of institutions, and I told them get their gold out of Europe, because once that first bullet does go, you're not getting anything out. Just that's what they do in history, period. The Germans were using, antique coins and stamps and whatever to get, because you couldn't get money out. So that's why a lot of the European collectibles ended up in the United States, during World War II. So that's what you're basically looking at. But I would say the CBDCs are definitely coming for capital control.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alex, as we agreed, there is a growing talk of a multipolar world order with BRICS challenging Western dominance. In this genuine shift, or is this a genuine shift, or is it the distraction from a deeper, more centralized power structure? Who is really pulling the strings here?
No, the BRICS is a real alternative to the ruling establishment in the Western world, which is basically on the axis of London, Paris, Wall Street, basically. The BRICS are trying to engineer a new architecture, a new system of trade, new currency of trade settlement, new way for countries to interact with one another. It shouldn't be too terribly difficult, and it shouldn't be too terribly controversial, because the system that we have had in the West for the last several centuries emanates from a very, very narrow set of vested interests, which is basically the banking cartel. And this system of vested interest has basically contaminated all social relationships uh, in in society in general. It's, it's the poison that affects absolutely everything. And so we've seen a rise of colonialism, imperialism. We've depopulated massive parts of the world, some of them 90%, some of them 100%, it's a system that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's keeping us permanently at war, permanently in crises. It doesn't have to be that way. Humanity is a massively productive um, species, let's call it that way. We should be living very, very comfortable, very abundant lives. The fact that most people struggle, that they can't make ends meet, it just is just an absurdity. So I think that there's a growing awareness that this system needs to be transcended. And so you see the process of decolonization gaining momentum. And for the first time in 500 years, there's alternative. Because up until now, the primacy of the West was practically unchallenged. So the change is real.
Yeah, yeah. Martin, you have been vocal about the decline of Western dominance, and you mentioned over here as well. What's the most dangerous consequence of this shift that people aren't talking about?
Well, it what our computer does show is that China will emerge as the financial capital of the world after 2032. Um, I mean, this you have to understand that the this whole process was set in motion by what we call the neocons. And it, back when Russia went into Crimea, Obama went to SWIFT and told them he wanted them to remove, and they refused. They said, "You're not going to turn this into a weapon." So they replaced the head of SWIFT in 2019. And then you have Blinken, who's a notorious neocon, and neocons took over the Biden administration. And then they told SWIFT to take Russia out. And then the audacity to threaten China, if you help Russia, will do the same to you. It's dividing the world economy. I mean, I look, I've had dinner with some of these people, and what I have to say is they're not that intelligent. Okay. They only look at their own little world, geopolitics. They don't understand the world economy and how, gee, you want to wage war against Russia, you have to sell debt. If you threaten everybody, they're not going to buy your debt. How are you going to wage the war? I mean, they don't make these connections. And, they have basically undermined the Western economy, period. And the financial capital of the world will move to China. As simple as that. And I can say this. I mean, as you know, we got offices everywhere, and we did a lot of seminars in Europe, etc. I never had to explain a business cycle in Asia, only in Europe and the United States. Cycles are part of their religion. They understand it. Whereas over here, most people want to engage in linear analysis. Oh, gee, the temperature went up 1 degree this year, so it's going to do that forever for the next, 1,000 years. We'll all be dead. This is what they do. It's linear analysis is just it's incredible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with this. Alex, your work often highlights the role of energy markets in geopolitics. With energy crisis looming, which nations or blocs stand to gain the most, and which are mostly likely to collapse under the pressure?
Huh, that's an interesting question because I could easily say, oh, obviously Russia and the Middle East, once they've shaken the colonial hegemony from there, but it could work out well for the United States as well because uh, my understanding is Trump is dead serious about absorbing Canada into the American system. And, the United States is a resource-rich nation. Canada is a resource-rich nation, particularly the western part, Alberta and Saskatchewan and British Columbia, I guess. And so, if that all lines up and they're working on it, the United States could find itself in an advantageous position as well. So, I think that Russia, Middle East, and the United States are in good position. But then, we're also getting these revolutionary changes in energy producing and storing technologies, where China is now a quantum leap ahead of everybody else. So it could put China could, through grit and research and knowledge, could put itself into an advantageous position with new battery technologies and new thorium reactors. And then we don't know what's coming from the United States and from Russia, but both the Americans and the Russians are working on innovations of their own, which could come to fruition over the following years as well.
Yeah, both of you have criticized mainstream narratives, but this question goes to Martin actually. What's the most pervasive myth in global politics or economics right now, and why is it so dangerous to believe it?
Well, probably the number one myth that affects all the central banks is Keynesian economics. Um, and Keynesian economics is kind of like the the Bud Light beer version of Marxism. That's all. The government still should be in control, manipulate us, etc. I mean, where Marxism, they just grab everything. Under Keynesianism, we do it gradually. Um, but basically, they're both interventionists, and I think that's what has to collapse. Um, you China understands this, and I mean, even in '97 when it was the Asian currency crisis, and I was actually asked to come to China by the central bank. I went because I thought I would at least get to see the Great Wall. I thought I'd have to meet some other bureaucrats again or whatever. And I was really surprised that then I understood why they called me instead of an academic from Harvard. They had sent these guys out and they worked on the um, dealing desk of London, Tokyo, and New York, and then they went back to run the bank, and they understood cycles. I mean, it was fascinating. So that when I got back, the Fed called me and the U.S. Treasury. Oh, gee, how was it like? You were the first one, and I just stuck the knife in their back and I turned it. I said they only hire people with experience, you know. But look, I think that is the big problem because when the world wakes up that the central banks can no longer control it. All right. That's that February moment that I was talking about in 1987. And the world goes, oh, shit. And that's when things will happen. When you no longer trust the government, you don't believe them, and then things change.
Yeah, Martin, your Socrates platform uses AI to predict market trends. How close are we to the governments, corporations using similar tools to manipulate markets or populations at an unprecedented scale?
Uh, I don't think they can manipulate markets. Um, you can basically, increase the volatility. Yes. You cannot change a bull market into a bear market. Um, and, I've been watching this for like over 50 years. It's just impossible. Um, and, uh, when Aristotle Onassis died, I had his, uh, I was to liquidate his part of his estate. He had the biggest holding of platinum in the world. And it took me 6 months to get permission from the CFTC to even trade at that level. And when I picked up the phone, everybody in the industry knew what I had. I mean, somebody in the CFTC just, hey, you want to know what's coming? This is just the way it goes. And here I'm the biggest in the world. And you cannot imagine. I saw it with the Hunt brothers in the 80s. When you're the biggest and you try to sell even, 10 ounces, they all jump in front of you because they think, oh shit, it's all coming. It's so I don't see this manipulation that people talk about. Oh, all these people outnumber this. It just doesn't happen that way. It's when I got called into the 87 Brady Commission, they had some professor there from Harvard or whatever it was. And I said, basically he said that we're going to investigate to find out who shorted this market to push it down. And I just said, you realize that every investigation since 1907 has started with those words and nobody's ever been found. And I said, don't you understand what makes markets go down? And I teach finance at, I said, very nice. I have over $3 trillion, 50% of the equivalent of US national debt under contract. I think I know how money moves. All right. And I explained that, look, the vast majority are long. Something happens, whatever news you want to talk about.
Sure.
And they go, oh my God. And they try to sell. And if you've never traded, you pick up the phone and you call the broker, and what does he say? No bid. Then you get it going down 1,000 points because there's nobody there. And then you get these politicians that think it's a short, and then they want to outlaw short positions. It's only the short that's going to buy in a panic because he's taking profit. I mean, they don't understand any of this stuff. They really don't. And that I think ultimately creates the big crash of what Alex is talking about. It's right. Just that's how it unfolds.
Yeah. Alex, as I recall, you have discussed the weaponization of financial systems. How are technologies like blockchain, AI, or surveillance systems being used to either unpower or enslave individuals in the financial realm?
Well, I think that the blockchain technology should help empower and emancipate people at the individual level. It should basically extend our scope of trading and entrepreneurship, rather than having a shop on the street and serving the community of people that walks by there every day. You can now ship your stuff everywhere around the world. This should be the promise of the blockchain technologies, but it can be achieved even with the well-engineered digital currencies. But obviously, the objectives pursued by the banking authorities in the world today, because they are the hereditary banking oligarchies who are openly looking at us as hackable animals to be controlled, to be um, uh, disciplined, put to work, and then eliminated when we've outlived our usefulness. Well, they will try to use that technology for control. they're not the first generation who had this idea. Maybe they have slightly better technologies today, but let's not forget that communist regimes of the past had very, very high degree of control over their population. It just isn't meant to be. Human being is not a termite. It's not an ant, a worker bee. Human being inherently wants freedom, and that never dies, which is why they're fantasizing now about chipping us and putting implanting chips in our brains and all these things. I don't think it's going to work, so they're just going to fail again. Unfortunately, it's going to be difficult for everybody. And then, I think that the solutions are going to come from the East because our authorities in the West, they will not give up, which means that they will go to total destruction before they yield any degree of their control and privilege in the world. So when everything breaks apart, we're just going to adopt Chinese and Russian and who knows from where else solutions. And probably that's going to be better than what we have today.
Yeah, yeah. Question for you both. If you were to warn the average person about one economic or geopolitical event to prepare for the next 2 or 5 years, what would it be and what practical steps should they take now, today?
I can go since
Yeah,
I do happen to have an opinion about this. Well, you have to get used to the idea that your money is going to become worthless. So whatever you think you have in savings is going to evaporate. To prepare, uh, you want to own a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver, at least, because these crises come and go. So you have to count on a period of time in which it's going to be very rough. So have enough gold and silver to cover maybe 6 months to a year of your expensive expenses. Have food reserve, and most importantly, of all other things, make sure you know your neighbors. Make sure you know who knows how to fix cars, who knows how to fix computers, who knows how to fix teeth, roofs, who has chickens and eggs, and who grows vegetables and so forth. Because by far the most important degree of resilience through crisis you get from your local community. That's your safety net. That's your support network. That's basically that. And don't imagine, okay, stocks, real estate, not a good hedge against inflation.
good points. Martin, same question for you. Average person, one economic or geopolitical event to prepare for the next 2 to 5 years, and what practical steps should they take?
Well, I mean, this whole issue of war is simply that they are losing power and they know it. Okay, so and I just went over this with Congress just actually yesterday. Uh, this is they always need an external enemy. So Europe is picking on Putin. When you look at the Canadian election, Carney was running against Trump, not domestic issues. So this is really what you need to understand. And I agree with Alex that uh, the governments are not going to relinquish power voluntarily. They're just not. And so the only thing you have to be mindful of is that you can have gold and silver. You're not going to be able to travel with it. There was just a woman from Canada trying to get into San Francisco, and she had $60,000 worth of gold, and they confiscated it. So just be mindful. What is it you're actually trying to do? If you want to leave the area, then I would suggest getting assets out ahead of time. And look, 100 years ago, you could hop on a plane with gold. You can't do that today. They're going, oh, really? What do you got? Italy, if it looks like you have too much gold jewelry on, they take it off and they weigh it. So just be mindful of that. I mean, a lot of people are moving to, South America, Uruguay, things of that nature, particularly if they have younger kids that would be, draftable. Is I had one good source that attended the Vienna Peace Conference a couple months ago and called me and he said, this is no longer a peace conference. All they're talking about is war and instituting drafts. That's what's coming. If they don't do this, all right, you're going to have this, like we've been talking about, and Alex has been talking about, the debt bubble bursts when you cannot sell the new debt to buy, to pay off the old. That's when it comes. All right. And they know that. All right. So what you're worried about here is that this is why they need war. They're just not going to relinquish that power. I've provided a solution at the videos on YouTube, how to get out of this, but they won't do that, because it requires them giving up some power. And I agree with Alex. They're just going to go to the very end game. And unfortunately, that's what this war stuff is all about.
Yeah, gents, let's wrap it up with this. I want to thank you for coming to my show. It was a great chat. I didn't expect anything less. Then thank you very much for joining me. And just final note, Martin, how can people reach out to you and see your work? Same question for Alex. Martin, you start.
Just, go to armstrongeconomics.com. It's an open site. You don't have to put in any emails or anything like that. We try to keep it open source for everybody in the world.
Excellent. Alex, how can people reach out to you?
I have two publications on Substack. One is for investors and traders called iSystem Trend Following. And I have a personal Substack called Alex Krainer Substack. And I'm also active on X. My handle is @nakedhedgy.
Gents, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.